Hello, welcome back to lesson 303. Yeah, this is A Course in Miracles, and we're deep into the workbook. We're on lesson 303, if you can believe that. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. All right. So what we're going to talk about today is very important. It's talking about our self, capital S here. Now, the Course, and we'll talk about this, draws a very important distinction between who we really are, our identity with a capital I, right? Self with a capital S, which you may be familiar with. It's a term that's used in world spirituality in various traditions to refer to who we really are. The Course is very on point and certain in the distinction that it draws here between self with a capital S and self-concept, as it brilliantly, in my opinion, brilliantly describes the difference. So self with a capital S is who we are. Self-concept is an ego idea. It's an ego idea. So we'll say some more here in a moment about that. Lesson 303 is the Holy Christ is born in me today. That's the idea. The Holy Christ is born in me today. This is meant to uplift us. Now, yes, you might be thinking in terms of pure non-duality, the Holy Christ was never born, so to speak, in the worldly sense, and that's true. It's always been, right? The Christ is the thought of God. It's us, it's you, it's me. It's your worst political enemy, him or her. Yeah, them too. Yeah. It's every living thing, described in many ways in A Course in Miracles and in other traditions in world spirituality as the thought of God, right? God's love. How about that? Yeah, it's who we really are. Our identity with a capital I is the Christ. So Christ is broader than simply the historical Jesus. So that already is a different definition than you may have been raised with in Sunday school, right? Yeah. So we're meant in contemplating lesson 303 to get in touch with who we really are. This is what all of spirituality is about, isn't it? This is what each and every one of these exercises in the workbook for students is truly about, is about our experiencing the truth of who we really are. In order to do that, we get rid of the self-concepts. We forgive, we set them aside knowingly, willingly, deliberately, consistently and persistently, in a process, if that's what it involves for you. And it is that for almost all of us. Yeah, we set those self-concepts aside so that we may experience the self, our self, capital S, the Christ, the truth of who we are. We simply allow it to be as it is. But if there are all of these self-concepts in the way, then it acts, they all act, as a block to that experience. It's like a wall. It's like a barricade. Now, ultimately, we've seen many, I think, very helpful visual examples in the workbook that describe this supposed wall as a passing cloud, as a bank of fog, right, that may appear dark and black, gloomy, and imposing, yet you can walk right through it. If you shine a nice warm light on it, it just kind of evaporates. So those are helpful and I think very, very handy visual tools that we can use. That image fits. It fits a self concept, why we made that up. So let's come back to this idea. Self with a capital S, the Christ. I mean, you can say Christ if you want to, as long as we mean what A Course in Miracles means by this, which is not simply referring to Jesus and only Jesus. Now, granted, there's only one of us anyway. That's the Christ. That's self, capital S. And naturally, quite naturally, we get in touch with this self in peace and quiet. It's why meditation and quiet contemplation is such a part of world spirituality. It's why prayer is a part of world spirituality, right? It's all a matter of setting these self-concepts aside. So what's that? What's a self-concept? Well, you and I have got them. Everyone that is here in the world is trained very efficiently and, yes, ruthlessly, as it turns out, to have a solid self-concept. What are these but ideas about who we are and what we're supposed to be? Our parents instill them in us. Our grandparents instill them in us. Our school, our teachers, our instructors as we grow up. Society instills all of this in us. This is what we should do. It's a concept. When we grow into adults, we've got, by the time you're in adulthood, doesn't matter what age you are, by the time you're an adult, you've got a thick wall of self-concepts that we're constantly being invited and encouraged to add to, by the way, with our professional degrees, with our professional certifications, with our positioning statements, if you're an entrepreneur, right? We're constantly being bombarded with information on how you need to grow your email list, which, is important for business, but the positioning statements that go along with it, when we think about it in terms of spirituality, are self-concepts. There's nothing wrong with the money that comes along with it. I like it. We need it in the world, but it's not the end-all be-all. It's possible to have financial success. It's possible to have a nice new home in the suburbs if that's what you want, right? It's possible to have a Mercedes or a yacht or just more time freedom, hot, sexy partner, right? Whatever, right? It's possible to have all of that. And it's important as spiritual practitioners that we don't fall into this all too common and really ridiculous trap of thinking that we've got to be dirt poor in order to be spiritual. Fuck that. I'll say that again on a different lesson. I mean, really, it's ridiculous, right? Nobody's saying that you have to give all of this up. What we are saying is that have it, sure, if you want it, but don't believe in its supposed reality. It's not solid. Your professional degree is a self-concept. Why? It's not who you are. I have one of those. I have a freaking doctorate degree, for God's sake. So, I know about this. It's a self-concept. Now, yes, I worked my ass off and bled, so to speak, for that. Suffered many, many sleepless nights. This is law school, a JD, reading boring appellate court opinions. Lots of reading that I would rather not have done sometimes. But hey, end result, here you go. You get a degree. It's a self-concept. Think of what you do for a living and how you label yourself that. Think of the general question, what do you do? I mean, it's a very common and a good question when two people meet each other. Say you run into somebody in an elevator. Hey, what do you do? How do you label yourself? You may as well ask that, right? There's nothing wrong with that. It's a self-concept. We're encouraged to have them in the world. In spiritual practice, we begin by recognizing that we've made all of them, and we begin a little bit at a time, if that's what's necessary, right? We begin to set those aside. Each act of forgiveness is setting them aside. Each act of prayer where you ask your teacher, your guide or guides to help you in a situation, that's setting some of this concept aside. So there's a big difference between a self-concept, which we made, and our self, which God made. That's the difference, right? Self-concept, ego, self with a capital S, God. That's the Christ, the capital S I'm referring to. Yeah, the thought of God, the extension of God, love, extending only itself. Only itself. So in getting rid of our self-concept, we have spiritual practice. And incidentally, this is something that bears repeating, is that as we're setting aside our self-concept, we're instructed to do it lovingly, right? Forgiveness is an act of love. It's a loving practice. Prayer should be a loving practice, because the prayers that, somebody breaks their leg, your political ally falls down a set of stairs and is hospitalized and can't run for office, right? Those kind of prayers are not answered, right? And why? Because God doesn't know punishment. There's no punishment to be meted out by God. Love does not mete out punishment. We do, right? Our self-concept does that. Why? It's confused. And it is confusing, right? Who in their life has not been confused about, gosh, what's my role here? What am I supposed to do? And if you're really honest with yourself, you might even say, I don't know what I'm doing here. Help. Ego doesn't want to hear that, right? So it's important that when we're in practice, that as we set our self-concepts to the side, that we don't bludgeon them. We don't set them up as an enemy separate from us. That's the problem in the first place, is we see our little self, our self-concept, as the center of the universe, and everyone else is not really anyone else. But when we see other people, we see other institutions, other political parties, we see them as opposed to our little self in mortal combat. And there is a phrase in personal development that a lot of people love. And if it works for you, great. I'm going to give an alternative perspective on this. This phrase that I'm referring to is kick fear in the face. Why would you make anything an opponent? You're making an opponent where there is no opponent. When I say there's no separation of any kind, it's not Tomas Garza that's saying it. It's what it looks like. It's what it sounds like. It's not me that's saying that. It's truth. So there's no opponent. In other words, there's no fear to kick in the face. Simply see it and forgive it. What happens? It's no longer there. When you make an opponent of something in your mind, because this is all in our mind, right? When you make an opponent of something, it's there, isn't it? Whether it tangibly exists in the world or not doesn't matter, because again, we're in the mind here. If you make an opponent out of something, then it's duality, isn't it? It's me against you. It's us versus them. Us against the world. What's up with that, right? So when we come back to an idea like lesson 303, we're affirming who we are. It's powerful. Forgiveness is powerful. So too are affirmations like this. This is like an affirmation, isn't it? A number of these workbook ideas are, and in fact, you could see and practice them that way. While there are other practice suggestions, as you can see and read here in the workbook, this is one way that you may absolutely, definitely practice these ideas, is repeating them like an affirmation, like a mantra. The Holy Christ is born in me today. The Holy Christ is born in me today. The Holy Christ is born in me today. And if you pause to let that sink in, to think about the meaning of that. There are multiple layers to this meaning, right? I'm going deep with this one. We're intended to go deep. And in practice, you're intended to go as deep as you're able on that given day. And granted, the 20th time you go through the workbook for students will be a very different experience than the first. That's a guarantee. Because if you go through this 20 times, you will most definitely be a more loving and forgiving light in the world. I think we can safely say that, right? So wherever you are, and even if you're not practicing this material, and you just happened to stumble across this video on YouTube and you're still watching after 15 plus minutes, say that you didn't stumble across it by chance. There's no coincidence here. Something I have said, or may soon say, impacts you on a very deep level. What is that, I wonder, right? Only you will know what that is. It's part of the beauty of showing up and teaching in any walk of life, by the way, not just someone holding themselves out as I do as a spiritual teacher. Part of the beauty of it is we don't know who we're going to impact. I don't know who you are watching this, but I thank you for doing it. Not necessarily for just supporting me and the work that I do. I appreciate that very much. What's even more powerful than that is your own commitment. Your own commitment to self with a capital S, your own commitment to awakening, the offering to the world of your own spiritual practice, your forgiveness, the love that you extend to everyone. That is, my friends, the most important thing. So I'm very deeply grateful to you for that. Benefits us all, doesn't it? All right. So I invite you to sit with this material, lesson 303, the Holy Christ is born in me today. I invite you to sit with this in whatever way you're able and whatever way makes sense to you. And if you have deliberately carved out a block of time for meditation or for spiritual practice or for anything that appears to be self-care, like a bubble bath, like a nap on the couch in the afternoon. Those are good naps, yeah. Like a walk in the woods or on the beach in the desert. But whatever that looks like for you, I invite you to take these moments. They're very important because it's in these moments of relative tranquility that we begin to get in touch with ourself, capital S. This is when and where we begin to really viscerally feel the truth of these ideas. So whatever that practice looks like for you, I invite you to dive into it. Just really sink your teeth into it, so to speak, today, right? Yeah, I mean, get dirty with it, so to speak. It's the best way. It's the most loving, and honestly, it's fun. Practicing these ideas is fun. Sense of humor goes a long way, right? Laughter is beautiful medicine. And of course, we begin to see the ways that we fuck up as human beings a lot. But hey, a loving, forgiving attitude is huge, isn't it? All right, guys. Thank you, as always, for joining me. And we're going to continue through the end of this workbook and beyond, right? Because it may look like the end when we do lesson 365, but I should say the beginning instead of the end, right? Yeah, so we can look forward to that. All right, guys, have a great day, and I will talk to you soon.